Peace. My name is Allah Forever. I'm the creator and owner of BabyBeautiful.co, which is an online baby store that we produce baby clothes. We sell baby clothes on the online baby store. Each week I do a video that deals with and surrounds the babies because that's what the store is all about. And I often make sure that the video is surrounding the babies, period. So every issue that I deal with from video to video is an attempt to get the word out and make it publicly known about the online baby store, the products that we sell, and the purpose of the store itself. And I usually give a background history of why I use Baby Beautiful as the model, because the logo that you see in the background is the logo for the store. It's a black baby, which is the symbol of that logo. And that is something that I decided, consciously made a decision to use that logo because it's geared towards the history of my own people. So when I speak about BabyBeautiful.co, I'm talking about black babies that are born today and those that are already here in the world. I'm focused mainly on addressing issues that surround them and the mothers and fathers that are raising, teaching, educating, and nurturing them to adulthood. So all of my issues that I deal with is surrounding that, because it's not just about selling clothes online, baby clothes online. There's a message that I bring with that, and that message surrounds the babies, the nurturing, the educating, the teaching, and the development of them on a mental, emotional, psychological, and physical level. And each week, when I do a video, it's pertaining to something that surrounds their development, their growth overall. Now, this week, the video that I'm doing in this one is going to surround something that directly affects them again, as in all the videos that I've done. Now, I've often spoken about different issues in each video because hoping that those issues will be something that the young mothers and fathers that's raising their children today could look at. And if it applies to them, then they can use this video or any of the videos that I've made in the series of videos that I started as a result of the online baby store to get the message out, but to bring also that with the online baby store, the message. If they could use any of the experience or the knowledge or information that I'm bringing to the videos to help them in raising their children in some form, shape, or fashion, then they should do that. Because today we have too many children, babies that are born in the world and are being raised by young mothers and fathers that really don't have the best ideas on how to raise children or babies that they are producing today. Now, of course, there's no particular book or model that is used as the perfect model for raising babies or children in the world today. There's no specific model that is perfect in doing that. So many people are confronted with how do they actually raise their children in today's society and in the world. And a lot of that has to come from their own backgrounds of their families, friends, people that they come in contact with. But that is really the issue that I want to deal with today. And it is the mental, emotional, and psychological abuse that many babies and children suffer growing up in families in the Black locations or areas in which they live. I've often said in several of the videos that I don't use the term communities because we don't have communities. Communities is when you control economically, politically, culturally, and socially, and educationally every aspect of where you live. We don't control any of that. So there's no Black communities that we're growing up in. We're growing up in areas that we populate or areas that we live in, but they're not actually communities. When we think of communities, we think of people who control every aspects of the lives of themselves in those communities. I mean, we think of the Chinese, the Japanese, the Koreans, the Asians, a lot of the Italians, the Jews. I mean, all of these people have communities right here in America because they control economically, politically, culturally, socially, and educationally all the aspects of those communities. So their babies and children are able to grow and develop in healthy environments. Well, that is not the case with Black people living in America. So I want to really address that. So this video is going to be focused on the mental, emotional, psychological, and physical abuse that has been taking place for a number amount of years in many, far too many Black families in America. So that's what I want to really focus on in this video. The mental, emotional, psychological, and physical abuse that has been taking place in many, far too many Black families in America. Now, of course, this is something that is not often spoken about, even amongst ourselves as a people. And there's many reasons why that is the case. Embarrassment, shame, accepted norm. These are some of the reasons why it's not spoken about in our own families. But many women and children go through this growing up in their families. And this is something that has a long-term effect on them in adulthood. Now, of course, we've often heard about many cases where you had men killing their whole families, killing women, killing children. This is something that is a serious issue that many times we don't even speak about it or even discuss it on any level. But yesterday, I was speaking to a sister who is a member of my nation. She has been a member of my nation for a number amount of years. And in speaking to her, she disclosed to me that she was presently going through a very abusive relationship, something that she has been dealing with for some time now. And she has attempted to really cope with it the best way that she could. And she said that she has reached out to many other people and she hasn't felt that she really got the kind of support that she needed to help her in her situation. Now, her case is not, unfortunately, the exception. It is becoming more and more the rule in terms of the abuse that women suffer in relationships and also the children suffer as a result of what the mother is going through. Now, these are serious kind of family issues that oftentimes many of us don't even want to deal with or even hear about. But the reality is that it happens. And it's, what do a woman do when she is being abused by a man that she's in a relationship with or that she's married to, and they have children together, raising a family? What does she do in a situation like that? Does she call police officers to come to the house? Does she seek some kind of help from women on the outside that have all these different organizations that help abuse women in relationships and marriages? I mean, many of these organizations and different groups and movements of women that are there to support and help other women that is experiencing abusive and emotional and psychological things that they're going through in relationships. Sometimes women feel uncomfortable reaching out to many of these different organizations and movements and groups that are there to really help them in abusive relationships. Now, I have like a lot of experience with this kind of thing because growing up in the family that I grew up in, I could oftentimes remember when my father was abusive to my mother. In fact, I can remember times where that abuse would often be displayed with my brothers and sisters who were older than me. And as the years went on, many of my brothers and sisters decided to fight back. They were much older than me at the time, so they decided to fight back. And whenever my father attempted to abuse my mother, they would make sure that he understood that that would no longer be tolerated. And what I mean by they made sure that he understood it would no longer be tolerated is they jumped on him and made sure that he understood that in a physical way. It wasn't no discussion about it. It was physical. So they was really protecting my mother, but at the same time, making sure that he understood that this will no longer be tolerated. And I come from a large family. You know, I have 6 brothers. It was 7 of us and 5 sisters. And growing up, seeing my sisters in different relationships with men, you know, as a young man growing up, oftentimes they was in relationships with people that I hung out with, you know, that I rode with. You know, it was like we were partners in the street life and stuff like that. When they was in relationships with these kind of individuals, they were like brothers to me. But when those relationships became abusive, now that changed the course of our relationship completely, because now I'm only thinking in terms of my sisters. The relationship that me and the individual had, that went out the window. Because I came up in a family where if anybody put their hands on my sisters, that is unacceptable. So whenever that happened, I made sure that it will not happen again and that the person who did it would be severely punished for even doing something like that. That was my way of letting him know that we part ways when you go in that direction. And in many situations, I wind up having to physically beat up some individuals that my sisters dealt with, stab, shoot. You know, I've done all kinds of things to them. But these were people that I grew up with. We ran the streets together. We was out there in the street life together. We got money together. We went to parties together. We slept in the same houses together. We ate together. But when it came to my sisters, that was unacceptable. and not to be tolerated in any form. It was fortunate that my 5 sisters had 7 brothers that refused to tolerate any abuse from anybody when it came to our sisters. But unfortunately, that is not the case with many Black women that are abused in relationships. That is the sad part of the whole thing. Even with my own family, I've seen on many occasions where some of my brothers begin to display the same kind of behavior that we would protect our sisters from. They was displaying the same kind of behavior in relationships with their women, their girls. And on many occasions I had to intervene, like, wait a minute, what are you doing? Nah, that's not gonna happen. But there was times that I was not there, couldn't be there, and this took place. So they not only grew up seeing this, but they became now individuals that also did this in relationships. Now, there's something to that because oftentimes when children grow up in households where abuse is taking place, they usually, in some form, shape, or fashion, they develop, and oftentimes that affects them in their adult life. With many women, when young girls grow up in abusive families, they are really being taught that this is accepted because they don't know really the difference. So when they get older and they find themselves confronted with the same kind of situation, they allow men to abuse them because they remember seeing their mother going through it with their fathers. So they think that this is a normal part of a relationship. That you fight, you get beat up, you get hurt. This is a normal part of a relationship. Because this is what they were seeing growing up. So this is what shaped their understanding about relationships. That abuse is something that's a part of relationships. And then you have boys that grow up seeing this in the family, seeing their fathers abusing their mothers. They exhibit the same kind of behavior when they deal with girls and young women. They do the same thing that their father was doing to their mother. And they don't see anything wrong with it because that's what they saw with their father. They can't distinguish between this being right or wrong. And this is a problem with many Black people today in relationships and in marriages. And when I spoke to this sister yesterday and she told me about that, I said, this is not something that I'm unfamiliar with because I grew up in a family that that was going on a regular basis with my mother, father, sisters, and then my brothers when they started getting into relationships with young women. So I've experienced it and seen it from my own family. So when this sister told me about it yesterday, I said to myself, that is becoming more and more of a problem with us as a people. And it needs to be addressed because the ones that suffer the most and have a long-term effect on them as a result of the abuse in relationships and marriages is the babies that is in those families that grow up thinking that this is normal or grow up exhibiting that kind of behavior. Many young girls don't even know how to deal with a relationship with a young man unless there is some kind of abuse. And young men don't know how to deal with relationships with young women unless they are abusing them. They see this as being normal. That there's no perfect relationships, that everybody goes through this. That is one of the biggest myths. No, everybody doesn't go through abuse in relationships. No, whether it be mental, emotional, psychological, or physical abuse. No, everybody doesn't go through that in relationships. That is not true. But we have accepted this myth that we've created within ourselves to justify continuing to exhibit this kind of behavior. Because it has been accepted for so long amongst us as a people that we see it as being normal. When you walk down the street and you see this happening with a couple, you see that as being normal. Couples fight. No, that's not normal. See, each video I often speak about this condition that we are under, this mindset that we have, that until we break the cycle of that conditioning that we are under, we will continue to exhibit the kind of behavior that we have been displaying in our lives all the way until we leave this planet. Because we have not attacked the conditioning that we are under. I'm talking about our values, our morals, our principles, our actions, and our behavior. All of the decisions that we make is coming out of that state of conditioning that we are under. So our decisions is as a result of the conditioning that we still suffer from. Many of us don't see anything wrong with it. We think it's normal that people go through that in relationships. Mental, physical, emotional, and psychological abuse? No, that's not normal in relationships. If you're in a relationship like that, you need to get out of that because that's not normal. We have often accepted it as being normal because that's all we knew. That's what we was exposed to growing up in many of our families or friends that we have that have been going through abusive relationships. So we accept it as being normal. That is coming out of that conditioning that we are under, where we think that the things that we do and the behavior that we display is normal. We don't see anything wrong with it. The way that we treat each other, because it's not just women being abused, although they are the most being abused. It's also men that go through abuse in relationships and marriages. But of course, that's not spoken about because, oh, he's a man, so he's supposed to be able to deal with that. Nah, it doesn't make it right because he's a man. No, that doesn't make it right because he's a man. That means he should be subjected to mental, emotional, psychological, and physical abuse from a woman because he's a man. If you are under that way of thinking, then there's a serious issue with you. Nobody should have to endure mental, physical, emotional, or psychological abuse in relationships, marriages, period. No one should have to endure that. And of course, it's easy to say that the person should get out of the relationship or the marriage. Yeah, that's easy to say that. But when you've already invested so much of yourself in a relationship, in a marriage, with a family, that's not easy to just walk away from that. To just change your life completely, to start all over again. That's not easy. That's probably one of the hardest things that a person would have to do, probably at that stage in their life. So it's not that simple to just walk away or get out of the relationship or the marriage. It sounds like it's simple, but it's not that simple. Because many people that are mentally, emotionally, psychologically, or physically abused, they feel like they're entrapped. They don't really have the strength to be able to pull away from that. At least that they don't believe within themselves that they have that. And even some of them would help. They still try to hold on to the relationship or the marriage because so much that they've invested in it. And not to mention that they are still emotionally attached, psychologically attached, mentally attached, physically attached. And that's something that they struggle with and how to really break that. So it is a serious issue. It is not something that you can just walk away from. That's why so many people suffer in abusive relationships and marriages because so many other things is involved in that. There's many more factors that is involved in the relationship and the marriage. And this includes if there's children involved, they also have to look at that. So there's a lot of factors that really is hard for them to make decisions about. And these are things that people on the outside don't really know. Because if you're on the outside of a relationship or a marriage, then you really don't know what's going on behind closed doors when they're in their house or in their home. Because oftentimes, women that are abused by men in relationships and marriages, when they are in the public, the kind of display that you see is not often shown like that in the public. Most of the time, this is taking place behind closed doors. So when you see her in the public, she may look like she's okay. She may look like she has a good life, that her family life is well, or a relationship and a marriage, but that is her protecting the abuser in her relationship or a marriage that she doesn't really even know that she is protecting them. But the kind of image that she put on in the public is that image where she is attempting to convince others that she is in a normal, functioning, happy relationship or marriage. When people are abused, they don't really want anybody else to know. It takes a lot for a woman to reach out to someone else about that abuse, because many times they often think that in some kind of way they caused this to happen. Now, that's to tell you that something is seriously wrong. When a woman is being abused by a man in a marriage or a relationship, and she turns it on herself to think that in some way, shape, form, or fashion, she caused this to happen. That tells you that there is a serious problem there. Because she's blaming herself. Now, she's the one being abused, but she's blaming herself. That tells you that this is a serious kind of situation. And you have many cases where men have killed their women, killed the mother of their children in abusive relationships. And this was something that people was able to see signs that something was wrong. In fact, many women have went and taken out orders of protection with the courts against their abusers, whether it be their husband or their man in a relationship. And even that didn't stop the abuse, because in many cases, they would violate the order of protection and still abuse the woman. These are all signs that something is wrong. And then many of those women wind up being killed by their husband or by the man that they was in a relationship with. And in some sad cases, they even kill the children. Yeah, the man that she was in a relationship with, not only do he kill her, but he also killed their children. Or the husband that she had, he kills the woman, his wife, and his own children. So it tells you that this is serious in relationships and marriages with abuse. And we hear about these cases all the time. But we go on with our daily lives as if, well, that's just that situation. That doesn't affect me. So I wanted to really deal with that issue because that has an effect on the babies that are in the families of the women that are being abused. They grow up with this. And in many ways, they either exhibit that kind of behavior or they are a victim of that kind of behavior. Whether it be the woman or the man. Whether they are the abuser or the ones being abused. In some shape, form, or fashion, it displays itself in the children that grow up in families like that. Now, there's all kinds of research that have shown that in abusive relationships and marriages and families, there's all kinds of different research that have shown that to be the case. But it still happens on a regular basis. Even with the courts involved, with many men that have orders of protection against them by the women, or even with custody battles with the children in the families and in the relationships. It still takes place. And I think this is something that we need to seriously deal with and address as a people, period. Because we have accepted it as a norm. We don't see anything wrong with it. That everybody goes through that. That is not true. That is far from being the truth. Everybody don't go through that. And it should not be accepted as a norm. We need to really seriously look at what is happening to us as a people in our families and how to address that, how to change that in families. But the only way we can do that is we have to begin that process with ourselves. What is it that we go through day in and day out growing up in our own families? And how does that affect the way that we interact and deal with relationships and marriages in our own lives? We need to look at that. That's the beginning process. And then when we look at that, the next step is, what do we do about it? If we know that this has had an effect on us, how do we deal with that? What do we do about it? We need to look at that as the next step. Because what we do about it and how we deal with it will determine later on in our own lives as to how we will be as a person, as a human being, as a man or a woman in a relationship or a marriage. We have to look at that before we get to that stage. Because if not, we will wind up exhibiting the same kind of behavior. There's all kinds of programs, movements, organizations, groups that address these issues. So if you feel like you need some kind of outside support, then you can look for some of these movements, groups, organizations to help you out. But don't just sit back and allow it to happen and do nothing about your situation, because that's not going to help or change it in any kind of way. So with that, I'm going to say peace and blessings until my next video.